Welcome Bala and welcome Gazal to this show, to this program. Glad to be having you with us and for you to share your thoughts on some of the important things that we're going to be discussing. Let me start off with a very simple question to get started, and probably Bala, we can go with you first. We live in these pandemic times that I think has globally it has awakened people to the need for preparedness, safety, and the importance to safety as a culture. In your own respective life and in your organizations, and in your organization, both the organizations that you represent here are deeply into across pretty traditional organizations, and there is an industrial side to it, there is a workplace side to it, and there are field people as well. So how do you embrace all of this and the importance of safety as a culture? What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Rajesh, and really good to be here. Thank you for inviting us. Let me start by saying, to me, the whole philosophy of safety starts from self-awareness. Once you start to believe in yourself and in your health as being paramount, I think safety follows. Because it's only when you are not conscious of your health that you tend to become little lackadaisical. Simple things like what we have observed in our plant, and let me take a reference from there. When we ask them to wear safety goggles, for example, when they are welding, it took a while for us to instill that discipline. But when it becomes self-awareness that I've got to take care of my eyesight, and it is important that I've got to be careful about my eyes, wearing of safety gear becomes a natural habit, becomes something very innate to him. And that is most important when it comes to safety as a culture. And that's probably one of the reasons why in our organization and in the environments that we work, we bring in that awareness to personal health and hygiene. And we see that translating into him being safe in his environment. And when I mean safe in his environment, he's conscious about his own safety first. And when he's conscious about his own safety, we feel that he will translate that to his colleagues and that to his team members. And that, to me, is how you build a culture. And let me draw one very simple example which we have practiced. When we started our CSR initiatives and we strengthened around education, the big need or the big demand from the government was us to build toilets. But when we went around and we looked at toilets, it was the toilets were there, but there was no water, there was no facility to drain the waste. And we realized there's no point in building a toilet unless and until the whole ecosystem is geared to use a toilet. So we first started teaching the children how to wash hands, how to be hygienic, how to use a restroom, how do you actually, the perils of open defecating. All this was, inculcated in the children. And then we suddenly realized over a period of time, the children started to demand toilets. And when the children started to demand toilets, we brought in the whole element of working with the government to build toilets, and most importantly, sustaining them with water facilities as well as a septic tank. So we realized that any culture to build the awareness has to come in from the beneficiaries or the people who will practice that culture. So to me, in my belief, safety as a culture begins from you being self-aware. And if I may just take another minute, I think the whole pandemic experience has taught us to be more conscious and aware of our health. So I see what the pandemic has brought about in terms of positivity, and that is self-awareness and consciousness towards health and safety.
So beautifully said. Now it revolves around individuals and health, the consciousness and awareness towards that, and that is what is going to make it sustainable. And even if there are companies coming forward to support, if that's not happening, embraced at a domestic level, it really does not meet the the rubber doesn't meet the road, as they say. So let me move on from there. And Gazal, this question is to you. Safety, if you were to bring the safety aspect from within four walls, within your houses and within the workplaces, and as Bala rightly said about personal hygiene, right? Many of the times, since as an NGO that works in emergencies, if you took care of your personal hygiene, a lot of those health aspects, you will first of all not be in a space where you will need help, right? So similarly, the kind of mishaps that happen on the roads, right? You are somebody who has been very passionate about road safety, and also been, you have initiated this road safety council, the Chennai Road Safety Council, opening a platform for companies to join in and be a part of that initiative. So my question to you is basically, if you were to look at safety on the roads, right? According to you, do you think it's a systemic issue, or it's more a behavioral issue? It's more a personal responsibility, or there is a systems also need to go, somewhere both have to meet, right?
Rajesh, you're always giving me tricky questions. Right. So I think one thing the pandemic did was reduce the traffic on the road and
Right.
reduce the traffic accidents on the road. So, we were all laughing about it in the last Road Safety Council meeting that we had virtually, where we meet every month, is that how at least the road accidents have gone down, and probably that's been a gift from the pandemic. Although one is not allowed to say any gift from the pandemic as a right, politically right thing. So if I look at a little bit at the, and I'm speaking purely from not as an academician, I'm not speaking as a politician, I'm speaking purely as a volunteer. I consider myself as a volunteer. So when we started the Ford on the Road program, which is basically every Friday, Ford volunteers would be at Sholignalu Junction to help people understand how to be more mindful and more safe on the roads, we realized that this problem is manifold. It is simply not just that there are no laws in place. It's simply not that we don't have the intention to be safe. I won't say that, but I think it's sort of a contorted mix that we have got into, where we have the laws, but we do want to flaunt it. We don't care about it. We want to be careful about our safety, but when it comes to road safety, we don't want to wear a helmet. So have you noticed strangely that everybody's wearing a mask, but they're not wearing a helmet on the road?
Yeah.
So it's really an irony that when we care about our health and our lives and not falling prey to COVID, we are okay to drive a two-wheeler without the helmet. We are okay to drive our cars without the safety. So I think it comes from being probably paranoid about some of the things which are very apparent to as a health risk, but not really being aware that this could happen to me. So accidents, strangely, nobody anticipates that in their lives, and that's one of the biggest reasons why so many people fall prey to accidents in our country. So I think yes, there is a need to go back and strengthen the laws, especially reinforce them and make sure that they are also I would say to a certain extent punishable, because that's the only probably rule we understand.
Right.
They're also uniformly implemented, as well as I think a huge amount of awareness that needs to be built in right from a child of age 6 when they go to schools. And that is why in our school program, we are also trying to educate children on following road safety rules. We do a lot of street plays with them. Our volunteers engage with them to help them understand what is right, what is wrong, because I think children can be a huge influencer for families, as well as you are not going to spend too much of time unlearning behaviors when they grow up. As for the behavioral issue, yes, completely. I would say I think we are unmindful of the fact that one single mistake could cost our life. One of the things that when we started the road safety program 2 years ago on a very aggressive note within Ford, is to say that let's avoid distracted driving. Right, we were all wearing helmets, we were all wearing seat belts. I mean, that's the least that a Ford employee could do. We're very careful about, we are in fact obsessive about safety, but some of these things we are still not mindful about. And I remember we did this huge campaign where we asked people, what are the 5 things that you will do for road safety? And a lot of we made them write it down, and we made them revisit that chart every single day of their work. And a maximum number of them, including me, wrote, I will not touch my cell phone when I'm driving. And I still do that. So it's something of an internal change we need to promise ourselves that we are going to do. And until, like Bala rightly said, you make that as a self-discipline for yourself, you are not going to be able to convince anybody else. So I think it's a mix of both, but what we can take responsibility as individuals, CSR companies, employees is how do I change my own behavior and first and role model it that to everyone else. So I think it's a difficult path, but I think the number of initiatives that are rolling out, the wonderful work that companies like Ashok, Leyland, Alert, all of us are doing, there is definitely a lot of change that can be expected.
Very nice. So profound and insightful thoughts from you, Ghazal. Coming back, from the roads, and if you look at some of the numbers, which are very, very alarming, and I think the numbers are reflective of some of the very fundamental things both Bala and Ghazal, both of you are talking about. The solution actually lies at an individual level. Even though corporates and governments can do a large, bring in a lot of initiatives and stuff like that. Now, I would like to move slightly to things that happen, emergencies that happen as well when it comes to our own workplaces. Now, if you look at the number of people losing lives or succumbing to some of the emergencies that happen, and that's also tying back to what Bala spoke about, health primarily. But provided somebody gets into a stage because of ill health or because of lifestyle or because of whatever the reason is, and gets into issues like cardiac arrest, which numbers are increasing, alarmingly increasing as far as India is concerned. We are right now number 2 in the world when it comes to sudden cardiac arrest, and the survival rate in India is 0%. There's no chance that somebody who has a sudden cardiac arrest will ever survive in as far as India is concerned. And most of them happening in workplaces, most of them happening at somebody's desk when somebody's at work, right? So this is actually a problem that is hitting across companies, beyond, across industries, across companies, in all walks of life. So my question is, as CSRs and as leaders in companies that are taking this initiative, this is a common problem that is hitting everybody. So what are your thoughts on making CSR a little more conglomerative, right, and aligned to achieve a slightly larger scale of impact? Because in our country, nothing happens small. If it happens, everything is large. There is no medium and small size in this country. It's only large and extra large. So what are your thoughts on that? And from there, I would like to lead to, as an NGO, how can Alert play an effective role, along with corporates like you, towards that thing that we should visualize. To you, Bala.
Okay, interesting question. Certainly, CSR or corporates involving in social accountability. I would actually not call it CSR. It's actually corporate social accountability. I've always maintained that we are accountable, because responsibility means you do a set of actions. Mm-hmm. In accountability, you are responsible for the outcome, and that is what I would like to emphasize. Corporates have a very significant role to play, because in bringing in this awareness and in bringing in this whole consciousness towards health safety, it has to be a 3-way or probably a 4-way process. Mm-hmm. And I mean 3-way, the individual is very important, and that self-awareness which I spoke earlier is very, very relevant to the context. Second is the government, and when I mean the government, it is the whole legislative framework, it is the police network, it is the healthcare network, and a whole host of things. Right. And the third, of course, are the institutions. And when I mean the institutions, it's the corporates, it's the NGOs, it's self-help groups, and a whole host of institutions, which mean that there is a collective individual or an individual collective action towards a particular cause. And all three have to come and work together in tandem. And in that sense, corporates as well as institutions play a significant role in building this awareness, because in a large country like India, the government can only do so much. And let us be conscious about it. It's very easy to point fingers at the government and say that you're not doing much. But the fact is, we are also as institutions or as individuals not really doing much. And it's a two-way process. I may be sounding a little critical, but the fact remains is we need to also own up to that responsibility and build that social awareness, consciousness around us. And I'm sure if everyone takes it up in their own single circle or in a limited circle, with the population widespread, I'm sure we'll be able to cover the whole expanse of the country. And in that sense, I believe that corporates will have to be accountable for their actions. Today, even today, when we approach many institutions and corporates, what happens is the first question is, okay, how much of contribution you need? So we are not looking at contribution. I'm sure there are enough and more funds for social action, but what should corporates bring in? Corporates should bring in that administrative capability, should bring in that system orientation, and should bring in the accountability towards action. And that is what corporates should bring into the social action environment, which means that all corporate principles that they adopt in terms of a budgeting, in terms of an auditing process, in terms of a follow-up process, in terms of review mechanisms, has to be brought into a social action environment. And that is where corporates can play a very, very significant role in bringing that management knowledge to social action. And the second one, the role that NGOs and self-help groups have to play is, in my opinion, focus on one key area or two key areas. Because I've seen many NGOs doing a multitude of activities, and they tend to be flavors of the month. Because this month it's education, next month it's environment. These are very favorite topics. But to me, I've seen many companies, and Ford, for example, or Alert, for example, Ashok Leyland, for example, TVS, for example, they're all very, very focused activities. And when you focus their activity, it becomes deep. Instead of, trying to figure out a mile wide and an inch deep, I would suggest that we go an inch wide but a mile deep into what you are choosing as a social action. And if I were to, give my thoughts to Alert, I'm sure Alert has got a vast experience and vast knowledge. I think Alert is doing a great job. And to me, what I would, urge, rather than saying what should we do, I would say I think you need to probably strengthen whatever you're doing currently and widen the scope of your activities to include the less and the underprivileged. I wouldn't even call underprivileged, it's not the right reference. I would say the under-resourced communities. We need to reach out to the villages. You need to reach out to the interior parts of the country. Because let me tell you, we work in and around Hosur, into interior, deep interior villages, in the tribal areas, in the hilly areas. And you would be surprised to know that there are more number of snake bite deaths rather than anything else. The number of snake bite deaths actually beats the corona deaths in these villages.
True.
And all we had to do was to just provide for transport because that golden hour was important. So as an NGO, you need to also pick and choose what is the solution that you need to. You cannot paint everything in the same brush. So NGOs have to play a critical role in expanding their coverage, beneficiary community to the very, very remote and under-resourced communities. So that's my response, Rajesh.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much. Very profound and something for us to take away from and look for those avenues. And as you rightly said, the last mile delivery is so very important. And in India, the last mile is that last hut, somewhere in the remotest part of the country. And until you have not reached there, you have not finished your role, not finished your part. So beautifully said. Gazal, your thoughts on the same? You're on mute, Gazal. You'll have to unmute.
Sorry. I said Bala has so beautifully, covered all aspects of this. I was just listening to him. I can't help but agree with his thought that we need to also expand our work not just to the cities but beyond. And I think that's a clarion call for organizations and NGOs like you. I really appreciate for the fact that when Alert says that all we do is create awareness on emergency response and do the training. So like Bala said, that there are a lot of NGOs with flavors of the month, and I do really respect NGOs who say, sorry Ghazal, this is just, that is all that we do. And I think that shows the amount of focus that you have, that you fix for yourself, a vision that you've created. uh, Coming to the point about the last mile beneficiary, this is something that we found was a huge gap and challenge for not just our NGOs, but even companies like CSR, where we wanted to restart our projects post, let's say, in May or June. And we found that technology, although available to all of us, is still not in the hands of the common man. Or even if it is, then it is still a big challenge. So, how do we address that? How do we take a program like yours to let's say an interior village in Hosur or Tirunelveli or Cuddalore, where the number of accidents etc. would probably never, this thought would never come to them on what is to be done when somebody goes through this, and access to medical services is even more poor. So I would say, how do we bridge that gap? There is a lot of opportunity for people in the cities when if I start talking about the awareness creation, but of course in the rural areas it's very less. So I think you should be bold and aggressive, approach organizations and say that it's great that you want to train your employees and your families, but what about people in the rural communities? Why don't you also adopt a district? Why don't you also adopt a region? So that's what we did 3 years back. We adopted 5 districts in and around, not in and around Chennai. So these are Cuddalore, Tirunelveli, Tenkasi, and we said we want to adopt the schools there, and we want to work around the schools and the school headmasters and teachers. So I think a similar program is very important, and Fort does not have any of its operations or even a business interest in that area. So I think that's a role Bala and people like Bala and me can play, and it's a wake up call for all of us to say that we need to step beyond our comfort zone and look at just the immediate communities we have. Coming to the employees, I think I would say the awareness that an awakened employee now has towards uh, emergency response is so huge that the 100 employees that took part in your program last year in Ford, each one of them has personally told me that this course needs to be mandatory in Ford. We have just probably 1 or 2 courses which are mandatory, and they are ready to go into activism and take this to the management. I think that's the power of learning how to save a life. And when I did that, I've done your course myself in my office. I would say it's life transformational, and it's unnerving to be in that space where you could actually handle somebody's life. And I think it's something that everyone needs to know. So I think from that awareness and awakeness is where we can create influencers for maybe my family, for my friends, for other colleagues whom I can say, hey, I did this course, you need to do it as well. So I think going back to your question, I would say that we still have a long way to go, because as you keep telling us, Rajesh, the biggest problem lies in people not wanting to react or respond to an emergency. Forget about knowing the skills, forget about knowing CPR. I don't even want to dial an ambulance. I don't want to get involved. I think that mindset has to change. There's still a long way to go. And we are asking and banking on you for that.
Well, thank you so very much. And
If I may interject here, Rajesh, I think
yes, Bala.
what Gazal has said about that awakening in individuals is very, very important. Today, even if I generically ask, I mean, why don't you help out, and why don't you, respond in any emergency, or why don't you help that victim who's on the road? The first reaction is, sir, I don't want to get into any trouble. I don't want to be called. I don't know where to take them. It is lack of awareness. And also, if you look at it today, if you generically ask, people would certainly remember their cell phone troubleshooting number, their Airtel, call
Customer
center
care.
number, Swiggy, Zomato. They are all in the tip of their hands. But if you ask them in an emergency, whom do you reach out to? They don't even know that 108 is a number. So it is that awareness, and I think this has to start from school.
Right.
Interestingly, in our government schools where we work, in our road to school program, as we call it, we've got a whole section around life skills. And the first one is emergency response.
Mm.
The first one that we do is emergency response. What do you do? If it is a snake bite, what do you do? Whom do you call? I mean, instead of just screaming out there and say, help, 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 and starting to cry, how do you kind of react to the situation? I think that self awakening, which Gazal mentioned, is very, very important. And the fact that as an institution and as a government, I think they should also come out and not victimize people who tend to help out and harass them. And I've seen it; it has happened that people are harassed for helping out a victim, and that needs to also probably be moderated. And alert can play a key role in working with the government in terms of, like, for example, how was family planning communicated
Mm.
when way back in the 30s,
Right.
and I mean 30 years back, sorry, 30 40 years back, how was it taken around, the messaging around dengue, the messaging around corona,
Radio.
for example.
Yeah.
Mm.
So why can't they do something around medical care and remove that fear that I've got to call the ambulance and help out? That fear has to be removed. And alert can play a very critical role influencing the government in terms of removing that fear in people.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's as we speak, the road ahead is becoming clearer and clearer for alert in my mind. So I'm taking a lot of inputs from you, and plow it back to the focus. And I think every time people speak about the focus alert brings in, that the big thanks goes to Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, because as raw passion, we could have digressed into many things, like youngsters getting to wanting to solve the entire world's problems. But it was him who kept drawing us back, and he told you just have to focus on this, and did not allow us to deviate. And thanks to him, and I think we've got to go deeper, Bala, as you rightly said. We would love to do that. And during when we were inaugurated, there was one beautiful saying the IAS officer who came for the inauguration told, and I see that ringing in both of your thoughts as well. He said, there are those three: government, the institution, and the NGO, the government, corporates, businesses, and and NGOs. He said that the NGOs will need to learn from the corporates and businesses best practices on how to deliver, how to execute the management principles, and all of that, because efficiencies are also important along with passion when it comes to an NGO. Similarly, for a business corporate, where having the heart of an NGO becomes very important apart from the efficiencies that they bring in, and the government needs to have borrow both from the businesses and corporates and NGOs. So beautifully said. Both Bala and Ghazal. I really loved this conversation that we had. So as we speak, the World First Aid Day is around, and we're hoping that the dream that is lying ahead of us, one in every family that needs to be trained in emergency care, with collaboration and with partners, with wonderful people like you, and the ideas that you're giving us, I'm very sure and confident that we will go even stronger, mightier, to reach out to as many people as possible. And probably we will have panel discussions later in times where we discuss better things, rather than looking at some of these grassroots issues. I really thank you for taking time out today, Bala. I'm sure you have a very busy schedule, and for joining us in this panel discussion. And thank you so very much, Ghazal, you as well, for taking time out and joining us. Look forward to engaging further with both of you individually and along with your organizations to take this message out there to every single person.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Rajesh.
much.
Wishing all of you the very best. I know you have a huge marathon, virtual marathon coming up. So keep running, keep walking, keep encouraging people to do that. Wish you all the best. And Bala, great meeting you here. Look forward to connecting with you.
Same here, Ghazal. Thank you so much. And it was lovely being on the panel with you. And Rajesh, all the very best once again. If you can make the World Safety Day as exciting as Valentine's Day, I'm sure you would have done your bit, and all the very best to you, and always looking to connect and stay connected and contribute in our own little way as possible. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you.
All these hospitals are there only if these patients can reach. What you are doing is a very noble service. You are able to first, for a person who would otherwise have lost his wife, you kept him alive. So I think the front mark goes to you. So you get the 99, that one person goes to the hospital.